Yes guys, welcome back to another Fancy Football Fix YouTube video. My name is FPL Nacho, and in this video we are going to be looking at the top transfers going into double game week 27. Now, if you are one of those that did join me on a wildcard in game week 26, then I really hope that you've recovered off the back of that Liverpool mauling of Man United 7-0 with Salah and Darwin Núñez really punishing us sellers. So if you're one of those that kept the faith in those Liverpool players, please do drop it in the comments section, as I am one of those that sold Trent, Salah and Darwin Núñez. But we move on ahead to game week 27. So we're going to be discussing those top transfers. So make sure you are hitting that subscribe button and dropping a like on the video. And without further ado, let's get started. So first up, we're going to be looking at those important Brighton midfielders, and it did feel like it was the week to bring him in game week 26, with both Mitoma and McAllister being the big winners, and Solly March being the one Brighton midfielder that didn't return. I was one of those that went for two Brighton midfielders in Mitoma and March, but ended up starting Mitoma, thankfully. But it really did feel like it was going to be one of those game weeks where one of those wasn't going to deliver, and the swing was always going to be massive. So hopefully you got lucky with the selection route that you went down. Now, just to cover off the points scored that they had in game week 26, McAllister top of the charts on 14 points, Mitoma on 13, and Solly March with those 3 points. But whereas a lot of people look at that, with Solly March, he actually didn't have the best underlying stats that game. 0.2 XG and an expected assist of 0.08. When we compare that to McAllister, he had an expected goals of 0.92, but of course he did have a penalty in that game, and expected assists of 0.66. Whereas Mitoma, 0.75 XG, 0.10 expected assists. So the numbers were good for all three of these midfielders, but McAllister standing out, as we know he is a penalty taker. Now on the screen here you can see the underlying stats since the World Cup up until last weekend, and the numbers are fantastic for all of these options in midfield. And it comes back to the same discussion that we had. Two Brighton midfielders is definitely the route to go for, but you almost just need to accept that there are going to be weeks that the one that you didn't pick is going to haul. Now, coming into game week 27, we need to remind ourselves that they do have a double game week, away against Leeds and at home against Crystal Palace, so a really favourable double game week before they blank in game week 28 and then have another double in game week 29. So first and foremost, if you are looking to bring in the Brighton midfielder, just need to be cautious that they do blank in game week 28. Now, looking at the underlying stats since the World Cup, McAllister is the one that stands out from an expected goals perspective. Now, as we mentioned, he is on penalties, and having that player that does have the penalties in his locker and even set pieces is a big factor when we are considering the FPL option. And the big thing I want to touch on in regards to McAllister is the change in position that we have seen from him since game week 22. So just want to cover this off. Since the Adam Lallana injury, McAllister's been deployed as a higher midfielder, more likely in the number 10, in front of a Caicedo, Pascal Gross double pivot. And since game week 22, when this change of formation has happened, McAllister has had an expected goals per 90 of 0.87 and expected assists per 90 of 0.31. So compared the numbers here to since the World Cup, they have shot up since he has changed the position into the number 10 role. And it's only since game week 26 where he's actually delivered from an output perspective. But it seemed like it was only a matter of time with the underlying numbers that he has been posting recently. Now, of course, it's always going to be short-term bias while I'm sat here saying to you, you need to buy McAllister as your number one option. But if he does continue in this position with these underlying numbers and as the penalty taker, I still think he is the go-to Brighton midfielder going forward. Now, there is the discussion that maybe once Lallana returns from injury, McAllister might be deployed further back in the midfield. But with the numbers that he's posting right now, with Pascal Gross doing a fantastic job alongside Caicedo, I don't see why they need to make any sort of change to the positioning of McAllister right now. It's ticking so well in the team. I don't see why we need to revert back to what they had prior to Lallana injury. So right now, McAllister still would be the number one choice for me if you are looking to bring in a Brighton midfielder. Now, again, as I mentioned, the swing in FPL points has been so drastic over the last few game weeks for Brighton midfielders, Solly March being the perfect example. From an overall perspective, he is the Brighton midfielder of choice. Expected goals per 90, 0.34, and expected assists, 0.47. And you can also see, from a projected points perspective, he is leading the way. So, even though Mitoma was the one that picked up the big haul, I still think Solly March is the route to go for if you are considering a Brighton midfielder. So on the face of it, guys, I think McAllister is number one just because he is that penalty taker in the team. Solly March number two and Mitoma number three. However, I do want to say that it is a situation right now where Brighton are running so hot, you have to accept that you can only go for two in the midfield, most likely, and you have to accept that there are going to be weeks that that third one that you didn't pick is going to deliver. But importantly, you just need to get that lottery ticket to be part of the game. And I think that is what we need to do with Brighton here. We double up and we hope that we pick the right two. And fingers crossed you have done that ahead of game week 27. But for me, McAllister number one and Solly March number two. Let me know your thoughts in the comments, guys. We're really interested to know your thoughts on the Brighton midfielders. So next up, guys, we're going to come to look at a forward comparison of the Brentford assets. Now, those are going to be Ivan, Toney and Mbeumo. Now, it's worth noting, of course, we are recording this before Brentford's game at home against Fulham. So fingers crossed, being an Ivan Toney owner here, he has bagged a hat-trick and it makes the conversation a little bit more easier after this video. But, of course, we are obviously going off the underlying stats that we have so far, and we don't have game week 26 to involve. So these stats are from game week 17 up until game week 25. Now, looking at the underlying stats in general, Ivan Toney leads the way for expected goals per 90. But we need to remember, Mbeumo is a much cheaper option than Ivan Toney at 1.9 million cheaper. So for those managers sat there thinking, I can't get myself to Ivan Toney, but with these fixtures coming up for Brentford, I can't miss the boat. I do still think Mbeumo is a fantastic alternative to Ivan Toney. We see with the fixtures on screen, they have a double in game week 27, they play in blank game week 28, and they also double in game week 29. But it's worth noting, I'm not a big fan of the double game week 29 with two away fixtures against two very informed teams, apart from the 7-0 loss for Man United against Liverpool. Outside of that, those are two tricky away games for Brentford. Now, looking at the big chances created for both players, they are still posting really good numbers. But what I want to note about Mbeumo is the fact that he does get substituted early in comparison to Ivan Toney. Now, he completed 90 minutes in game week 25, but on average, he comes off around the 70-75 minute mark for, depending on a game state situation, where it's for someone like Visser or more of a defensive-minded player. So it is worth noting, if you do go into Mbeumo, his minutes are a lot less than what we are getting with Ivan Toney. Now, of course, while Mbeumo is a bit of a minutes risk, we have, of course, two factors we need to consider for Ivan Toney. First and foremost, he's on 8 yellow cards. 2 more yellow cards, he will be suspended for 2 Premier League games. So he is treading that tightrope over the coming game weeks. And the second thing is, of course, the betting scandal. We are waiting for confirmation on when he will officially receive a ban from football, and we don't know when that will be. But some news going around is that it might be April time when we may get some confirmation. So I think for the next 3 game weeks, we are going to get Ivan Toney minutes over that period. But again, things can change. So there's always that risk when you are investing in someone like Ivan Toney. So realistically, guys, if you have the money available to you, I absolutely think Ivan Toney is the route to go for. And it's a brilliant entry point for you going into game week 27 with the double, going into the blank game week 28 afterwards. I think it's a fantastic time to own him. In Mbeumo, I don't feel like I am tempted to go there unless you really love the Brentford fixtures and you can't get yourself to Ivan Toney. Otherwise, I like him as an alternative. But realistically, guys, if you can find the funds elsewhere to get to Ivan Toney, I think it's the route you can go for. And then if the worst case scenario comes and he does get banned, you've got yourself an easy sideways move to someone like Watkins, who has a fantastic game week 28 fixture at home against Bournemouth. So still, guys, I think the Ivan Toney move is still a fantastic pick for your FPL team. So last up, guys, we're going to move on to a defender that has started to emerge as an FPL option. And that man is going to be Ben Chilwell. It has been absolute donkey's years since we have considered Ben Chilwell as an FPL option, but maybe the time has come. Now, of course, he has sat out pretty much all of this season with that really bad knee injury, but he started to bring himself back to match fitness, and we did see him get a start in the midweek at home against Leeds, where Chelsea picked up a clean sheet, and we managed to see Chilwell back in the FPL returns with that assist from the set piece. Now, of course, it is worth noting that is a brilliant factor in regards to Chilwell, is the set piece potential from corners. It's worth noting, sometimes we do rotate our corner takers at Chelsea, but Chilwell, when we play this formation of a back three with wing backs, he is the predominant corner taker on that left flank, putting in the outswingers. Now, just to remind ourselves, 5.8 million isn't cheap for an FPL defender when we have lots of other defenders that double in game week 27 and those that also double in game week 29 that many may feel are playing for better teams right now. As of course, Chelsea aren't really convincing us from an FPL perspective and both a performance perspective. However, I have stumbled across a stat which I think is really, really interesting and very surprising to me. Since the World Cup, Chelsea have the second best expected goals conceded per 90 of any team in the league, and they also are second best for expected clean sheets per 90 of any team at 0.47 per 90. So I am really, really shocked at those numbers there, because I was fully expecting to see Chelsea in the bottom five considering their run of form recently and conceding such sloppy goals. But based on the underlying numbers, they are still a very, very good team from a defensive perspective. And it is worth noting that they did deploy a 3 at the back at the weekend, which was a slight change to the recent 4 at the back that they have been playing. And when Chelsea do play the 3 at the back, this is when Chilwell and also Reece James, it's worth noting, really do come into their own and turn from a good FPL option to a fantastic FPL option. Now, you can see the numbers here since the World Cup. And again, Chilwell has played very few minutes, so we are looking at a very small sample size. But it's 0.12 expected goals per 90 and 0.08 expected assists per 90, are decent underlying numbers. And realistically, with the fixtures coming up for Chilwell and Chelsea, Leicester away doesn't feel like a good fixture from a defensive perspective, but if they do remain having 3 at the back, they will look at their wing backs as a source of attacking threat. And those that know Chilwell know that he is the best in this Chelsea team for that on the left flank. Cucurella has been out of the squad for the last few weeks, and I would anticipate as long as Chilwell doesn't have a flare-up of the injury, we will consistently see him as the left wing back or even the left back in the team. Now, a few precautions here. Chelsea do play the second leg against Dortmund in the midweek, so there is no reason why you should be pulling the trigger early on someone like Ben Chilwell. If they were to proceed in the Champions League, I think that makes Ben Chilwell a worse FPL option, as I don't think the minutes are going to be easy to predict with someone like Marc Cucurella able to sit in for the Premier League games and Chilwell for the Champions League games. However, if Chelsea do get knocked out of the Champions League, I think this enhances Chilwell as an option, because I think Potter only has the Premier League to focus on, and naturally I think Chilwell is the better left back in this Chelsea team if we were to be selected an 11 to win us a cup final. Now, the other caveat, once Reece James returns, if we go to a 4 at the back, Cucurella does accommodate the left back role well, as he tucks in to make a back 3 and Reece James can then progress down the right flank. But while we are playing a back 3, Chilwell is a fantastic FPL option, but just caveat that the formation and the form of Chelsea is a hard one to predict over the coming game week. So guys, that is going to wrap up today's top transfers going into double game week 27. It'd be really interesting to know your thoughts and transfers going into this weekend, as I think it is going to be a significant one for the upcoming season. And if you did enjoy the video, please do hit the subscribe button and drop a like, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care. Cheers.